Welcome back everyone. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the iPhone 12 Pro and see how this phone holds up in 2021. Now, one thing I can tell you, I've actually been using this specific iPhone since the first day it came out, since the first day I bought it. So I've been using it since day one. And what I can tell you is that overall, it's been a very good ride. I like this phone a lot. There were some complaints into it in the beginning but since then, I think it's gotten better. And I think, if you're going to pick up a phone like this, I would say go for it. It is currently pretty much the best iPhone you can pick up. And I would say, there's really not that many complaints about it I've had since then. But since we are getting kind of close to the iPhone 13, relaunch, you may be better off waiting. But even then, it looks like the iPhone 13 or iPhone 12s isn't going to be that big of an update as far as I can tell. So, if you want to, go for it. Pick up the iPhone 12 Pro. If you want to pick one of these things up, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, the front, the body, everything about the 12 Pro is one of the best assets for this specific phone. I do think it does feel better than something like an iPhone 11 Pro, so I think that's cool. I love saying that. But when you do have phones like the iPhone 11 Pro that isn't really that far off from the 12 Pro, I mean, there's really no point in spending more money on a 12 Pro when you already have an 11 Pro. The front of the 12 Pro has that 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. It's 1170p, so I think that's great. The panel, I think it is not as good as the 11 Pros, but it's still a pretty decent panel, so I will give it some credit there. But I feel like Apple could have done a little bit better had they just, maybe improved a little bit of the specific display, maybe added 120 Hz, because when you look at the Samsungs, you look at OnePluses, all these phones have way better displays. So I don't know what it is. Hopefully Apple makes a big change this year. I doubt it. You do have the notch up front with Face ID, Lightning port on the bottom, IP certification, and on the back, that frosted glass back, which I've mentioned before is beautiful. I still love it. I still like it to this day. And it actually has that MagSafe capability, which I mentioned before, feels really good, which like I mentioned before is actually pretty useful. I use the MagSafe charger every single day. I don't know if it charges my phone faster than my fast charger. It might not, I don't know. But I do like having just like that magnetic clasp on the back that literally just charges my phone. And I do use that Apple case, so it still charges through my case, which is really awesome. So that's something I really do appreciate with this specific device. And you do have that triple camera setup, which we'll go ahead and hit on right now. Now, triple camera setup, 12 megapixel wide, 12 megapixel telephoto, 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and the front camera has a 12 megapixel sensor as well. Now we have 4K 60 on both the front and the back, which is really, really good. And besides all these camera things and all these little specs and stuff, I can tell you in my experience from using this specific phone the last couple of months that it's been a very good camera. It's been very, very great. And I mentioned this before in my other video, and I think most of you relate to this. It's like if you go and take a photo somewhere, if you're going and walking around in the woods or something, based on the lighting condition, you can already get a sense of how the photo is going to look like. So you can, before you even take your phone and take the picture, you already know how that photo is going to look like. And that's just how accurate and how predictable this camera is. And I love that about this phone. I've had, a lot of other phones, Samsungs, OnePluses, and it looks like it's very inconsistent. It might seem better than some photos. It might seem worse. Even if the camera quality is better than, an iPhone, I already know what my iPhone is capable of. So, I don't really have any surprises. And I think that's a really good thing about the iPhone 12 Pro especially. The camera is really good. Now on the flip side, owning phones like the iPhone 11 Pro and iPhone XS and iPhone 10, there are improvements with the 12 Pro, but especially the 11 Pro to the 12 Pro is such a minor difference in so many different areas that there's really not that big of a reason for you to go jump up from an iPhone 12 Pro to an iPhone 11 Pro, in my opinion. I mean, vice versa, the 11 Pro to the 12 Pro in terms of camera standpoint. Other than that, I think this camera is great. Anything I've ever done with it is perfectly fine and I like it, but I don't know. I just feel like it wasn't that big of an upgrade from the predecessor, but again, what are we going to do? I'm still complaining about the same exact thing from the first day I bought it, so that essentially covers it up in a camera standpoint. Now again, probably the biggest, asset of picking up an iPhone is iOS. You're getting a long supportive phone from this thing, and since the first day it came out, I've gotten tons and tons of updates for this specific device, and I think that's a really cool thing about this phone. You have a long supported device on this thing, and like I mentioned, when you have a phone like this, you're going to be supported for so many years that you're probably going to end up upgrading your phone before it even goes out of, software lifecycle. So I think that's another really big thing about this phone, and another huge thing that you have, the capability of. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. There's a lot of issues with it, especially when I first bought it. There were a lot of problems, but I think since then it's gotten, much better. And I really do like this phone just based off the specific, capability it has behind iOS. So in terms of that covers it up there. Battery life is also very good. It was really bad when I first got it, way worse than my 11 Pro. But like I mentioned, since then it has gotten better. So I do have a lot of respect for Apple, at least, fixing the battery issues early on in the life cycle. And since then, it's been pretty good, to be honest. Now, ending it off with the performance, this device does have that Apple A14 Bionic chip inside of it with 6 gigs of RAM. Now, this was the first iPhone to bring 6 gigs of RAM, and I do think it's a very, very good performing iPhone. Really, every single thing I've done with it since the first day to now has been perfectly fine. And this is my main iPhone, so whatever I do on a daily basis, this is the iPhone that I use. Whether I'm going on TikTok or texting people, calling people, whatever I do on a daily basis, this is the phone that I use. And to be honest, probably the most heaviest thing that I do on my phone is like switch between a ton of apps at one moment. So I'll go from like YouTube to TikTok to Instagram to Twitter, and I'll go from one app to the other. And when I have a bunch of apps loaded in the background, very rarely do apps go out of memory. And I think that's the biggest asset of the 12 Pro. I really don't think there's been that big of an improvement in terms of like app opening speeds or the way games load or anything like that. There's probably a little bit of difference. I've tested it before between all these phones. I haven't really found there to be that big of a difference, but the RAM management is the one area where I'm like, wow, this is a pretty big difference for sure. So I think that's awesome. I love seeing that. I think everything else about this phone is still extremely fast too, so I don't really have too many complaints when it comes down to anything else. I think this phone is a very good performing phone. Is it perfect? I don't know, it's like perfect enough for me. I will be updating to iOS 15 when it officially comes out, so I may do another review when that comes out. But like I mentioned, I don't plan on installing iOS 15, the betas yet, and it does seem like iOS 15 has been a little bit slower than the other versions of software, so that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind. But other than that, I think this phone is perfectly fine in the performance standpoint. And to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, is the iPhone 12 Pro still worth it in 2021? Well, I'm gonna tell you 100% yes. This phone is still completely worth it without a doubt. It's a very good, stable phone, and there's very little things to complain about, like I mentioned. Now, it's not perfect. I've had a couple of issues here and there kind of arise, especially early on, but since then, it's been pretty good. I think maybe the only other issue I've had is this display issue, which for some reason, every time I, increase or decrease the display, the brightness for that matter, it just randomly will stop. It'll either not register it or it'll like get lower and then it won't increase. It's very weird. But other than that, I've had a very good performing phone from this thing. The cameras have been perfect. Really, everything about this phone has been really, really good. Like I mentioned, if I was just basing it off the first day or first week that I bought it, then it'd be a little bit different. But because this thing has gotten improvements and has gotten a little bit better since then, I think that in and of itself deserves a little bit more respect for the iPhone 12 Pro. But the only reason I wouldn't recommend it right now, to be honest, is because the iPhone 13s or the iPhone 12s are about to come out. But if you don't care about those phones, if you're okay with getting a, 1 year generation older, even if you plan on buying in the used market, that may be a smarter thing to do. So that's what I would recommend in that standpoint. But other than that, I think this phone is still really good. I love it a lot. And if you want to pick it up, like I mentioned, I would highly recommend it. So that's pretty much it. If you want to pick it up, links are down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Hit the like button if you guys enjoyed the video, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.